Hi everybody, welcome to the Art Workshop. My name is Christopher Epling. Thanks for tuning in today here on Pike TV. We have a very cool program in store for you today. I hope that you will join us for a little bit. Relax, sit back, and let's just draw together. I think drawing is one of the most relaxing things in the world to do. And I think we all agree right now at this point in time that we all need a little bit of relaxation. Summer's approaching us, as the time of this recording anyway, and I thought that, with this program today, I would pull in something that incorporates character building with a character centered around this time of year, and a device that I've often talked about in the art workshop, but never had a chance to actually bring in and show you in action or in movement or in a working situation. So I'm really excited about that today. So we'll go into a little bit more about what that is here in a second, but before we do that, I'm going to talk about first our mediums that we're going to be using. Now, if you're at home right now and you'd like to join along, all you really need to do this is a pencil, eraser, and some paper. You don't necessarily need all the other things that I'm going to be showing you. Those are just different options for you to do later on. Now, if you do have these things at home, I am also going to be using ink, so grab an ink pen, preferably a felt tip marker, a small, maybe sharp, fine tip one, and then also I'm going to be using a little bit of watercolor in today's workshop. So let's just say you had some watercolor laid around at home. If you do, grab that though, because we are going to be using it, okay? All right, now I want to talk about the materials a little bit more in depth. This is something that you obviously do not need, but I have brought it in. Now this is a light box. Now I've often talked about the use of a light box in art, and I talk about it in terms of drawing the circles and the shapes that I use called the circle method for a technique in basic drawing. Now this is a direct assistant to that technique. Now do you need one of these in order to draw? No. But if you were to get involved and let's say you really wanted to start promoting your work and creating stuff maybe even to sell, a light box is a vital, important device that you need. Now I'm going to go ahead and power this on. So now you're going to see it's lit up obviously. Now early light boxes, you can see how thin this one is, super thin. It's powered by a USB cable. You can also get an adapter, of course, like you use for your phones, smartphones, and plug it into the wall directly. But this is powered up, very thin. Early light boxes were quite large, and they weren't very, easily portable. You couldn't really take them around. This one I found fairly cheap online, and I thought this is a perfect time to bring this in and show you how to use this. So I'm going to start out by turning this off again, if I can. There we go. And I'm going to pull out a piece of paper, lay it on top of it. Now this is what character building is all about. So when you hear a lot of the times I talk about the circle method, just watch this at home if you don't mind. This is what I'm talking about. So I build different shapes on top of them. If you watched any type of documentary on maybe animation or animators, especially Disney, you'll see how they'll first draw out these shapes, circles, ovals, different types of shapes combined together, and they take those shapes and they start to develop them then, and they start to draw upon them and create more and more. Now, if I didn't have a light box, I'd have a couple of options right now. I could sketch these little shapes out, start to press down harder as I go along designing it, and erase, erase, erase. The good thing about the light box, and the main reason to use a light box, you're going to see this pop out here in a second. Take another piece of paper now, lay it down on top of what I just got through finished sketching out. And you should be able to see, hopefully at home, you can see that. There you go. You can see how now I could draw upon the shape that I've just created. And I don't necessarily need to do all that erasing anymore. All I really need to do is trace over the lines that I just created. And you should be able to see now, let me dim this a little bit for you, figure out how to do it a little bit more. There we go. You should see the shapes underneath this piece of paper. So now what I could do is trace over the lines that I just made. This time I know exactly where to place certain elements, such as maybe the eyes of a character, so I'll do here, and the nose of the character just below that. And I continue on and on until I've fully developed a character. Now this saves you time. You don't have to erase as much as you normally would. You do not have to go back and, let's say, guess where certain elements belong on the drawing. What I mean by that is, where did I place the, exactly where did I place the eyes on the original drawing? This time you know, because it's underneath your art that you're creating at the moment. This is the major benefit of a light box, and this is something that I would like to kind of explore more today with you here. So in the art workshop today, we're going to be using this technique of the circle method and tracing over our own work in order to create our art with, okay? So now you can follow along at home with me. Now, if you are into art and drawing, one more thing I want to talk about in terms of materials are these little armatures, these little tiny wooden figures. Now, I know you've seen these before in art shops. You've probably seen them in hobby shops, I mean. These are used exactly the way you'd guess. You position these in certain ways, and we've talked about these before in the art workshop. You position them in the way that you'd want to draw a character, and you'd stand it up in front of you at your table. And the artist then would sit back and look at this and sketch out these circles, ovals, all those little different pieces of elements that you need that connects the limbs and the knees and the hands and everything else. You'd sketch it out exactly how you see it. Now they're a little bit more, let's say, advanced. Now they have these types of little mannequins like this one here that comes with an assortment of hands. So you have different types of positions for the fingers, position for even the arms, and you would pop off whatever you need on this character and put on whatever you're looking for. You position this character the same way you would the other one. It just has a few more points of articulation on this one. So if you are interested in designing characters, coming up with your own characters, which I know a lot of students are right now, and you have to draw that character in different positions, in different motions throughout a certain book, I would suggest investing in one of these. You don't need one of these high-tech ones. You can get away with using the wooden one just fine. But if art is something you want to pursue more and you're looking into designing your own characters, those things are certainly an option. So let's begin today's art exercise by talking a little bit now about our approach to this design. So I want everybody at home to follow along with me as I do this. I'm going to draw sort of large, that way you can see it. Start out by drawing an oval. Now look how I position my paper. If you're using 8.5 by 11 piece of paper, I have the paper sitting more wide than it is tall, like a hot dog, not a hamburger, as they say in middle schools. So you start out with an oval at the top. Then I want you to come back here and draw a second oval. Look where I position this, over here to the left bottom corner of this oval. Ovals do not have corners, but you can just follow along with me the best you can. Now, just below that, we're going to add an additional oval. Now, what we're doing is we're building the basic layout of a character. Now, although this oval's needed for the neck, this is the head, shoulders, there's certain pieces of these that we do not need anymore, and we can start to get rid of them, such as this top part of this oval here. I'm going to get rid of it now so it's a little less confusing as we move forward. And where this oval overlaps here. So as I get rid of it, you can see now how this starts to connect a little bit better. There we go, like that. Now, the next thing that we need is to work on the arms. So I'm going to have one arm extended back in this position. So here's the top part of the arm to the elbow. There's a circle for the elbow. And then this little thin oval comes down. So this is from the elbow to the hand. So now we have the hand here. Okay? Now let's work on the other arm. For this arm, it's going to extend downward to the elbow, which will be about right here. And then from the elbow to the other hand. Now you can see how this starts to look a little bit more like a person in a way. We have the head, shoulders, and arms. For the body's going to be the trunk of the body at least, a shape that looks almost like a marshmallow. And you see how I'm continually adding different shapes together to build this from the ground up. I'm not trying to draw everything exactly the way I imagine it would look in a finished piece right offhand. I'm slowly building up from the bottom up, okay? Now, the waist is also an oval, so our waist would be about here. Now, I've positioned this arm forward for a reason. I want to draw this character hunched over, almost like the character has pulled a muscle in their back, okay? So I'll draw the leg extending out, another thin oval for the leg to the knee, okay? And then this little oval here down to the foot. Okay? And then we're just drawing circles and ovals. Now the tricky part with this right now, though, is positioning them all where they need to be. That's the only tricky part. I think everyone can draw an oval or a circle. Pretty much everybody. It doesn't have to be a perfect oval, but... And then from the knee down to the foot here. So this foot's going to be off to the side just a little bit. Now, I have the basic shape of this human character that I want to build. I could go in now, erase some of these ovals that I don't need anymore, at least pieces of the ovals. And I could start to build the character up slowly by getting rid of certain things that I no longer need. Now, if I were doing this without a light box, I would have to continue erasing, continue pressing down harder, and continue to build the character up from the groundwork. But with a light box, I'm going to show you how easy it is now to go in and over top of what I've just done, create the look of this character. Okay? So I'm going to grab a piece of paper out here and lay this one right on top. This is a little bit bigger. Turn the light box on. It's going to be a little bit hard for you to see with the lights. I'm going to try to do this so you could see, okay? So now you can see the overall look of this character just based on those shapes that I've done. And now I've saved myself so much more time. You still have to design, though, the character. So now I'm going to draw a line coming down where the middle of the face is here. All right, now I could start to actually add things to it. So first of all, this being the center of the face here, I want to know kind of where the eyes are. Now, this oval does not represent exactly what I want to do with the head. I'm going to carve out pieces of it as I go. So you see I've started over here on the right-hand side of this oval, and now I'm starting to build the look of my character. There's a big chin on this character. Goes back to a mouth is open like this. And you can follow along with me at home and draw this. Position every single thing that I'm doing close to where it looks like on your object. So for instance, up here at the oval, the top part, you would bring a line coming down, shaving off this much of the oval here, and then you continue at the bottom, dipping below with the chin up back towards the body. Okay? This line represents the center of the face. Now I could draw a nose here, and I could draw a couple of eyes with just circles, one here, one here. Now this person is going to be in severe pain, so we're going to draw some pretty big pupils. And a surprised look on the character like that. And the hair of the character, bring it back. I'm going to bring it up almost like an Elvis pompadour. It looks like a wave, right? Comes up and comes back towards the back of the head up here. And then I continue down the side of the head. And you can see how these lines now have already been established for me. All of these lines that you can see through the light box. All I'm doing now is just putting detail in. There's for the hair, the ear here. Pretty good sized ear for this character. Now when you're designing characters for books, whatever it is that you may be working on, maybe a story of your own or someone else's, you're wanting to capture the look of the character in your first few goes. So you want to try at least to do that. That's your goal. And how do you know what the look will be? Well, if you're writing your own story, you know in your mind. If you're working on someone else's story, you have to read the story thoroughly, and then you start to pick up pieces that the creator has put in the story that talks about the character, maybe describes how they look. And then from there, you design the character. Now notice here what I'm doing. I have this shape underneath this piece of paper, and all I'm doing is tracing over my work now, over top of those shapes that I've done, and I'm adding things to those shapes that weren't there before. So here, out to the elbow, down to the hand, to the elbow, down to the hand. When I get down to the hand, I'm going to put, again, more detail. So add a finger, a thumb, and then I'll go down the opposite way. Here's the shoulder. You can see now I have everything that I need to create this with. All those shapes that I've placed at the very beginning of this exercise help to guide me. I don't really need to guess where things go. I don't need to worry about erasing a million times. The lightbox helps assist you in that way. If I took my hand away, it'd be a little bit hard for you to see. You can see a little bit, but I'm going to keep my hand up here though so you can see the rest of this. So now we're getting down to the legs. The legs comes down here to the knee. So this forms the right leg, and then over here to the left leg, down, pant leg comes back up. Now for the feet, I have these little ovals that I've drawn. I don't need much more than that really. All I'm doing is putting a little bit more detail in there, like that, okay? Now you can see how the character's been fleshed out more. We started out with just these shapes, ovals and circles, and now we have a little bit more detail. Now if I wanted to continue doing this, I could even get an additional piece of paper, lay that over top of that one, and trace over this again, adding even more detail. But I think we're at a good spot right now, at least for this exercise, to go on to the coloring portion. We have a character that has been sketched out pretty well. The design is there. We can tell at least what's happening with the character. The character is hunched over. They've pulled a muscle in their back. Now adding a little bit more detail as we go, we can put some buttons on the shirt, maybe a pocket. You may want to put maybe a belt on the pants there. I really encourage anyone that's thought of their own story, that's maybe been running a different idea for a character over in their mind, to sit down and sketch that character out. Do your best to take your idea and create something with it. I would love to see more artists and authors and creators from our region creating stuff. That's my goal, was to get people excited about this, this resource, this medium of illustration combining art and words together to tell a story. I would love to see more artists involved. Now what I'm going to do is put a little bit of color. So I pulled out my watercolor cakes, meaning that these are all in blocks. I have a pen here that holds water, so I don't have to worry about redipping my brush in water constantly. And what I'm going to do now is just go over this character with some blue, the shirt here, and I want to add a little bit of color to the character. Now I'm not looking to do a super precise in terms of technique watercolor here. I'm just wanting to add some different details to my character to see what it looks like. This is something that the process at least is repeated over and over and over with illustration work and cartooning. You're constantly creating characters, creating different looks to those characters to see how it might come out. I'm combining a little bit of blue and a little bit of green together and just mixing this up to get a nice kind of fun color going across the shirt here, over to the shoulder, down this way too. And you can notice how I'm letting the color kind of run out, so I'm not keeping it really vibrant. I'm allowing the water to kind of dilute it so that when it gets over to the edges, it's getting a little bit less intense in terms of color, right? It's not as bright. And you could do this with a regular brush, just as well, by adding more water to the brush than you do watercolor. It'll eventually get lighter and lighter as you go, until you get to a point there where you've got just this tone of color going across the paper. And that's what I want. I just want a nice kind of flow of color here of green and blue, almost like a tie-dye shirt. Get the pocket here. Now the collar, I'll do a little bit more of a solid color here for the collar. So we'll pull the blue out. And you can see how easy it was, though, after we placed this image down on top of those shapes to create our character. Had we sat down together and tried to draw this character exactly the way this looks, by just starting maybe with the eyes and then the nose and going on and building it from there, it'd be quite difficult. You'd have to maybe, erase a whole lot, I'd imagine, to get all those elements looking correct. But where we had those shapes underneath their art to begin with, all we had to do was go in and build upon those shapes. Now, I've seen students in the past who do not have access to light boxes. Now, we all don't. Now, like I said earlier, though, they've become much more affordable than they were. I've seen a lot of students that would go and take their art, and you're basically tracing over your own work, of course, so all you really need is a light source. I've seen students take their drawing, their original drawing, the circles and ovals, and they'll tape it up to a window even and allow the sun to come in. So if you're at home and let's say you're really eager to start creating your own characters and you don't have access to a light box, well, you do kind of. It's just going to take a little bit of ingenuity. Go over to your window, put the paper up, another piece of paper on top of that, and you could trace it. Now for the shoes, I'm going to mix a little bit of brown here with this reddish color. Maybe like a tannish color we're going to pull for the shoes here. There we go. And for the other side as well. Now the last thing we do with this is after we have all of these elements sketched out and all the elements colored, is go back in and we're going to add more detail by tracing over our work. And that's where the ink pen comes into play. But I love to see shapes turn into something different than what they are when they originally start. So seeing those ovals slowly turn into a character, that's the magic of drawing, and that's the magic, I think, of illustration. Is you see something that starts out in one form, and when it's finished, it turns into something totally different. And for me anyway, that's what gets me excited every time I create. Every time I create something, I get super, super, super excited about that process. Now what I'm doing is adding some white to this brown. I just want to try to get some sort of a flesh tone. Doesn't necessarily have to be any sort of particular flesh tone. I just want something that resembles skin. This will work just fine. And I'm going to go now over top of the hands, arms, neck, and head. So while I'm doing a little bit of white mixed with some brown. And of course, there's a little bit of that brown from the shoes carried over in this. So you may see a little bit of that popping out here and a little bit like with around the ears. And I'm not really trying my best to imagine where the light source is or all those techniques of watercolor right now. I just want a color. Because with character design, what you're doing is you're laying different things on top of your art in terms of color to see what it would look like. And if you're working for someone, they will want to see maybe this character in all sorts of different colored shirts. They may say, well, let's see this character in a red shirt, green shirt, blue shirt. So what you have to do is provide them images then of that character in those different options. And instead of sitting down and redrawing this character from scratch every single time, you simply lay your art on top of the light box, sketch this character out again, and then color it differently the next time. Light boxes save me a ton of time when I use them. I highly recommend, again, anyone out there who is interested in creating art in terms of illustration, to get a light box. This is probably a public service announcement for light boxes. Not really, but I really like them, as you can tell. So what I'm doing now is putting a little more brown in here in the hair. So you're continually adding detail. You're continually going back in and refining something to get it to look a little bit more finished as you go. Now you can tell this character definitely is experiencing some sort of back pain. So in this story, the author or publisher could have said, well, we want to see, this character pulls a muscle in their back early on in the book. Let's just pretend this is a children's book and this is the father. And I'm making this up completely off the fly, but let's just imagine that the kids now have to help the father with some chores or accomplishing something, and the father can't. He has to give instruction to the children to do that, which would make a very interesting children's book. This is the father in that story. So we've at least achieved the goal of making a character look as if they're in pain and they pulled a muscle. There we go. So we have a character that's now sort of fully developed. If you were going to send this off to a publisher, you would want to probably ink the character, which is the last step. Now I'm using a nib pen. You don't necessarily need one of these to do this with. You need just a regular, like I said, fine tip marker, felt tip preferably. There's different options for that. One thing I would suggest doing is allowing this to dry first, because if you go back in here while this paper is wet and you start to trace over this or ink over your work, you're going to see a mess. Another thing that typically what would happen is all those pencil lines that I've drawn, those would probably be taken out before this step here. But we needed those in order to tell where to add color, especially for the camera, because it'd be very hard for you to see anything if I erased all the pencil lines except what was needed, which would be very, very light pencil lines that we'd have to ink later. Now here's where I've added a lot of water, and I probably should have started at the bottom and moved up, because this is the last area that I actually watercolored. So I know this is going to be a little more wet than the bottom. And now I'm just going to keep going the way I'm going though, because I'm on a roll with this part. Get the eyes, nose, and I'm just tracing over my lines now. That's all I'm doing. But I love to see it when a character comes to life like this, no matter what the character might be. A lot of times when you're working as an illustrator, you are working on, other people's ideas. And when that happens, you're forced to draw things that you typically probably wouldn't draw. And even though you may not want to draw, let's say, a bird a million times or an owl, you always, or at least I do, get a thrill of seeing it come to life though, from basic shapes to a finished product. Now we're almost done here. We're going to trace over our lines real fast. I'm using this nib, which can be very quick, but it also can be very slow, depending on how much ink you use. If you use a lot of ink in it, then you're risking it kind of overflowing, making a huge mess. But the shirt is especially wet. I put a lot of color here on the shirt. Almost done. All we're doing now is just locking in these lines that we created, which again, all started with just simple ovals. Character design is supposed to look very sketchy, supposed to look unfinished, I think. Doesn't have to be, but it's that process of just figuring out what does a character look like. And the shoes, all of this starting out with just ovals. It's pretty crazy, huh? Put your name on it, and you're done. I'd love to see how you all did today. If you get a chance to send your work in, you can do that pretty easy. You can send it to us here at Pike TV at piketv99@gmail.com. And please include your name if you don't mind. And also maybe if you're a student, where do you go to school? What grade are you in? That sort of thing. We'd love to know more, as much about you as you'd like to share. Send us your work. We'd love to see it. We'll share it in the next show. So I hope you've had fun. I really love character design, as you can tell. Light boxes are so important. So if you don't have one, try to. And if you can't, find a good window. It's summertime. There's a lot of sunshine. So thanks for tuning in. Hope you had fun today. I sure did. Till next time, I'm Christopher Epling. Keep drawing.